this is going to be my last Battlefield 1 weapon review. That's nothing necessarily to be sad about, because there's going to be plenty more weapon reviews come Battlefield 5, which is at this point less than a week away if we're honest. But for now, this is the last, and incidentally also the 60th weapon review I've done for Battlefield 1. So I thought we'd do something a little bit special. Now, instead of rehashing kind of the weapons that I talk about on this channel a lot, skill cannon weapons, auto-loading, Selbstlader, RSC, those kind of weapons, I thought we'd focus on a weapon that I don't really like that much, or at least up until this point, have not really been able to make work for me personally. A weapon that supposedly is very good in the right hands, the person who knows how to use it, but in my hands, just doesn't lead to the kind of results I can get with other weaponry. And I'm talking, of course, about the Huot Automatic, be that in the low weight or optical variant. That's up to you which you prefer. That is the weapon that we're going to be talking about in today's weapon review. And as per usual, we're going to quickly go over the stats of the weapon, compare the two different variants, the key differences between them, but then we're really going to focus in on the playstyle needed to make this weapon succeed, and why I, and possibly other players out there, really haven't managed to get this weapon to work for themselves. What's missing? What are we doing wrong? So starting off with the stats, as we always do, looking at the low weight variant of the Huot Automatic, we've got a maximum damage of 26.5, minimum damage of 20, giving us a guaranteed 5-shot kill at long range and a guaranteed 4-shot kill in close quarters. The actual damage is a little bit lower than some of the other LMGs, so you're going to be able to take less advantage of wounded targets, but your actual bullets to kill on a full health target are the same as pretty much most LMGs out there. What isn't the same is your fire rate. At 475 rounds per minute, it's amongst the lowest, other than the very, very big magazine, long-range focused kind of LMGs that we've had added to the game at later stages through DLCs. But other than that, it's pretty abysmal when it comes to actual damage output. Its muzzle velocity is okay, I guess. Not great either, 740 meters per second. There's plenty of LMGs with better muzzle velocity out there. And the same could be said for the 26 bullet magazine size and the okay-ish reload, but given the size, maybe on the longer side, at 2.85 seconds for the short and 4.25 seconds for the long reload. Where things start to look a little bit better for the Huot Automatic, in this case the low weight, is when we start looking at recoil and spread. In terms of recoil, this weapon comes in at a vertical of 0.28, a horizontal of 0.14, and a first shot multiplier at 1.4. Low recoil across the board, easily controllable, ideal for more long-range engagements. Spread is a similar picture, with a base ADS of 0.18, that's while aiming down sight and not moving, an ADS while moving, pretty good for LMGs at 0.82, and a hipfire, also pretty good for LMGs at 2.75. The raw accuracy stats of this weapon are good. What's even better is its spread behavior in terms of spread increase and decrease. So as everybody pretty much knows, the LMGs start off at their minimum spread for ADS while not moving, ADS while moving, or hip firing, then massively increase in spread thanks to their first shot spread multipliers, and then thanks to their negative spread increase, slowly decrease. Essentially, they start off accurate, become very inaccurate, and then go back to accurate. Now, one of the deciding factors between LMGs, especially for long range, is how quickly do they return to their fully accurate state. Well, in the case of the Huot Automatic, this is amongst the fastest, I actually believe the fastest LMG out there to return to full accuracy. Thanks to its first shot spread multiplier of -4, this weapon is fully accurate again on its 6th shot. So in terms of inaccurate shots, you've got 4 shots. Shot 2 to shot 5, shot 1 and shot 6, and all subsequent shots are perfectly accurate. In the case of standing still and aiming down sight, you're looking at 0.18 degrees of possible spread. And that's great. That's great for long-range targets, and amongst the LMGs, it makes this the most viable non-bipod LMG for long-range combat. It means you've got the best time to kill of the LMGs, essentially, at long range on targets, because your bullets hit sooner than the rest of the other guns' bullets do. Not in terms of muzzle velocity, but in terms of when they're actually firing accurate. Now, in terms of the differences between the low weight and the optical, the most obvious and frankly the most important for anybody choosing between these two weapons is whether you want an optical sight or an iron sight. That's the real decision here. There is a few other differences that you should point out. Amongst them, for example, is the difference in recoil. So the Huot Automatic Optical has slightly lower horizontal recoil at 0.123 versus the low weight's 0.14. It's also got slightly better raw accuracy stats in the department of ADS while moving and ADS while not moving at 0.135 versus the 0.18 of the low weight and 0.615 versus the 0.82 of the ADS moving on the low weight. These are all good. What isn't good, however, is that it's got a higher first shot spread multiplier, a -5. This weapon takes 1 bullet longer to return to its perfect accurate state. So your first and 7th bullet, as well as all subsequent bullets, are accurate. And this puts it, in terms of just damage on target at long range, at a disadvantage to the low weight. Another disadvantage it has is it doesn't have a bipod. Now, while the Huot Automatic isn't focused on bipod combat, it is always useful to have a bipod, frankly, if you're going to engage people at long range. Sometimes you find that perfect ledge, because I would never recommend going prone. You're just gonna get sniped. But stats out of the way, let's start talking about how to make this weapon work, where it's effective, and why it just never seemed to work for me as player. And we start this off very simply with an analysis of different kind of playstyles. So you have the typical assault player, close quarter weapon, high DPS, runs in, hip fires down his enemies. The kind of run in, die, spawn, repeat kind of game mechanic that frustrates some players, but frankly is a perfectly valid tactic if you're doing it correctly. Also a very effective tactic in terms of objective play. Then you've got the kind of player who prefers the more flexible weaponry that allows them to aid their team on the objective, approaching the objective, and in between objectives. So anything from medium long range to maybe even medium close range, maybe even close quarters. And there's varying degrees of effective weaponry there, but they're generally found amongst the SLRs in terms of the skill cannons, but even in terms of weapons such as the, say, Rigotti or the Mondragon, be that Storm, be that Optical, or be that Sniper variant. Some of the LMGs can be categorized somewhat in that category, although they become less effective at long range, but more effective at close quarters. Weapons, for example, such as the Bar Storm or the Bar Telescopic, if you really like a lot of visual recall. Those kind of weapons are those that frankly sit my playstyle more. I like being able to kind of rush in on an objective, take a couple of targets out in close quarter combat if I have to help my team get that final objective on front lines, get that final objective on operations, but I then don't want to be completely screwed as soon as we have to move on to the next objective and I find myself engaging targets at medium long range. That's why I love weapons such as the autoloading, the RSC so much, and even amongst the assault class. One of my favorite SMGs are frankly those that allow me a little bit more in terms of flexibilities. For example, the Riberol, or in the case of the support, the already mentioned Bar Storm. But there is a different kind of player as well, the kind of player who religiously, no pun intended, because we are talking about a weapon that does have a little kind of sect-like fam following with a high priestess or chief priestess or whatever the correct term is. The kind of player that really pays attention to their engagement distance, their positioning, to get the most out of their weapon. And your classic and easy to understand example of this is a sniper trying to take advantage of his sweet spot damage model. For example, on the Martini Henry. It would be ill-advised to use the Martini Henry outside of its sweet spot damage model if you really want to get the most out of the weapon. It's just a weapon that really only performs very well inside its sweet spot. And that, of course, being a large sweet spot isn't too difficult to achieve, but you're never going to find a Martini Henry user rushing in on the objective to get that last minute cap unless he's considering using his secondary weapon. And the Huot very much falls into a mixed category. A mix essentially between the category I've just been talking about, that very position-orientated category, and the more flexible category. Because while it does have some flexibility in terms it's effective essentially from medium range to medium long range, it's not effective at the extreme long range, and it's definitely not effective in close quarters. Hipfire being effective or not really just doesn't matter if you've got weapons that have half your time to kill in terms of damage output. And a lot of the close quarter weapons these days have just that. The SMG 08AT, the Machine Pistol, the M1919 SMG or Annihilator, be that Storm or a Trench, to just name a few of the close quarter weapons with ridiculous amounts of damage potential in close quarter. You just can't compete. And this is one of the first and initial gripes that I have with this weapon. It seems just not as flexible as I really want it to be. But at long range, you've got a different problem. At long range, you're still using an LMG, which means if you're not bipoded and your target is head glitching or prone and they're, let's say, 100 meters or more out, while you can kill them, you better hope they don't shoot back. Because those kind of targets that we're talking about now, those long range targets, are two kinds of players. They're either a sniper, in which case they can dome you if you're not careful, and at those ranges, while you can AD spam a little bit given the moving accuracy of the weapon, it would still be recommended that you stand still to really take down your target as efficiently as possible. So they're either that kind of sniper, or they're a bipoded LMG, which is even worse because they'll not only suppress you, they'll rip through you 3 times as quickly as you can put them down, even with the best non-bipoded, essentially long-range LMG out there, the Huot Automatic low weight. So when it comes to this weapon, Not only is important positioning yourself to engage targets, I'd argue between 25 and 75, maybe 100 meters. No, it's also important that you choose your targets very, very carefully. You can't take on a sniper that's actively trying to kill you at actually long ranges if only his head is popping out. The chances of you hitting are, even with this accurate LMG, frankly just too low in my playing experience. I've been killed by too many snipers trying to do it. But if you bear that in mind, and you really take support as a supportive role, you're always the second line of defense. You're never up front. You're never the first line of defense. If you guys start losing on an attack of the objective, you are the first to start falling back. You will find success with this weapon. I managed to finally get it to work, and I had a good time and had, frankly, some good scores. There's something interesting about playing the Huot the way it's supposed to be, essentially as second line gunner. Not only do you start racking up a decent amount of kills, you start racking up a huge amount of squad assists and kind of assists on targets because you damage somebody for 60, 80 damage and then they disappear behind a piece of cover. You still get a bunch of points though. You also tend to get revives because you don't tend to die in very kind of dangerous frontline positions, so the medics can generally get to you quite safely, and they do. I get more revives playing as support with the Huot definitely than I do with the SMGs from the assault class, because frankly the medics just can't always get to me when I die in the center surrounded by 12 different enemies. Also, you can act as squad leader in the most traditional term, as center for your team to spawn on. So you stay a little bit off that objective that you're trying to target, trying to attack on operations, and provide a spawn for your dying teammates who are frivolously trying to get onto that objective. It doesn't sound very rewarding, but it's very effective. And frankly, it makes for some pretty easy top of the scoreboard plays, both in terms of KD, in terms of points, and frankly, in terms of usefulness for your team. Yes, you're not throwing your body on the objective just as often as you maybe would like to. In certain situations you can, because the targets that you're engaging on are no longer on the objective, they're further out, and then you can be on the objective. But you're never going to have the kind of flexibility that you have with something like my favorite weapon, the auto-loading 835. So to give a final explanation as to why this disconnect exists, for example, between me and the holy church of the Huot user, is we have different playstyles. I'm way too aggressive, proactive in my playstyle to get on that objective. That doesn't mean, however, that the Huot player is less skilled or less effective for their team. If using the Huot correctly, as I've regrettably almost found out myself, you can be very effective with the weapon. It's just a completely different battlefield experience. It's not as action-packed frontline experience as you have with the assault class, with the aggressive medic, but it's nevertheless a rewarding experience, and frankly, also a very effective one. That being said though, I'd love to hear what you guys think of the Huot low weight in the final days of Battlefield 1. Have you gone back and given it another try, given that it's been kind of buffed over the years over Battlefield 1's development in terms of better spread attributes, better recoil attributes, and of course the time to kill patch, which reduced the number of bullets required to down your target in close quarter and long range? What are your thoughts on the weapon? I know some of you out there really do enjoy it, some of my viewers. You know who you are. We've spoken about the weapon in the past before. That all being said, however, leave all that down below in the comments or hit me up with it on Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, found it interesting, found it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.